Well, hello and welcome to the Optimistic Heart. I am Paul Flood. I am the Optimistic Heart, and I'm grateful that you were here to watch this video today, where I'm going to share what happened on my father's deathbed and what happened after I forgave him. It was an extraordinary experience, and I think you're going to like and hear what happened here. An optimist is a person who knows that no matter what happens, something greater is always ready to emerge. And it is from our heart, from the center of love, that the greatest things are always going to come forth into our lives. My dad and I had a very up and down relationship throughout my entire life. He was 82 when he died, and I was in my mid-50s or late 50s. And the things had been up and down, even into the last months of his life. We had good times and we had tough times, but I know I'd always held a grudge against him, and I didn't want that to hold on. So the day before, we figured it was very likely that he was going to die overnight or the next morning. I wrote up I typed something up about what I wanted to say to him, the final thoughts that I had with him, to say to him. And so I typed this up and printed it out. So I was in his bedroom with my siblings and with my mom and my sibling spouses and mine. And I asked them if I could have a couple of minutes alone, and they all left the room. So I read what I wrote to my dad. And essentially I was saying, I know we've had a lot of tough times together. I want you to know that I realize I created a lot of pain for that you experienced, and I do hope you forgive me for that. As a matter of fact, I know you forgive me for that. And I want you to know that obviously there was a lot of problems and things that happened as a result of things that you said and did. And I want you to know, Dad, that I forgive you as well. And I love you very much. And at that moment, and if you've ever been with an elderly person the day before they died and they are on the deathbed, you know that there's something like a transition between the physical world and the spirit realm, and where it's going to be when they transition. So, but it was almost like a comatose person. He had not been responsive for a day or two. So I wasn't sure if he was going to hear anything I said, or if he hear it, but I wanted to say it and say it to him. So when I finally said, and I ended that, and I said, I forgive you, Dad, and I want you to know how much I love you, he bounced out of the bed and upright and reached out to me and said, I love you, pal. Oh, geez, this happens every time I do this. So he said, I love you, pal. And then he fell back down on the bed and was once again comatose. And I just sat there stunned. I was at a total loss and just weeping, tears of joy and love and happiness. And this is 9 years. It's coming up on 9 years. You can see the impact it still has on me. But I wanted to share this story with you, that the power of love and the power of forgiveness, even with someone who you may have had very, very tough times. I was able to let go of so much that I was holding on to for so many years, and it all just was wiped away in a rush and a wave of love in just a couple of minutes. And it was because of a decision of mine that I said, I am going to let him know I love him and forgive him. And he came back into his body to let me know that he loved me as well. So the last words that I had from my dad were, I love you, pal. Pal was his pet name for me from the time I was a little boy even to growing up. And it was just such an extraordinary gift that I received as a result of the forgiveness. I forgave myself for the anger that I had held towards him, and I reached out and I forgave him as well. And his spirit came back down to say, it's okay, pal, I love you. If you have an opportunity to do this in your life, take it. I know there's a lot of wounds that run very, very deep, and some people it's impossible to even talk to them. Even if you can forgive it without being there, it's going to be a gift that you're giving to yourself and a gift that you're giving to them. My dad was a child of the Depression. He was raised born in 1930 to a very, very poor Irish family in Newark, New Jersey. Lived in very poor tenement homes and things, so had a very, very difficult life. At the age of 14, his father died in that December, so his Christmas that year was at 14 years old, his father died. A month later, in that January, his older brother died in the Battle of the Bulge, the World War II. If you've heard, that was a horrendous battle, and we'd lost an extraordinary amount of people, but his brother was one of them. So at the age of 14, my father was now sole support for his mom and his sister. And I think back to those times and said, oh my God, were his formative years. And so at the age of 14, they didn't have all the social nets and things that we have today, and he knew he was going to have to be the one that was going to take care of his mom and his sister, and he did it. I think of the day when people say, how can you forgive him for some of the things you've told about? And I said, I think of a 14-year-old boy walking out of a poor old apartment building in Newark, New Jersey in January of 1944, maybe a snowy, cold day in Newark, New Jersey, and had just finished probably the funeral for his brother. And he's going down the steps into the snow and slush of the Newark streets. And we're getting ready to go back to school and looking back up at the apartment and saying, I am now the sole support and I have to take care of my mom and sister. And then walking to school, carrying that load and that burden. Many, many years later, he told me, Paul, it was always one of the things that drove me more than anything, that I was going to make sure that no matter what happened, you and your brother and sisters were not going to have to go through the suffering that I went through. So that was always what was driving me. And so in his way of thought, it may not have been what I might have wanted for the loving companionship and feeling, but he was giving in the way that he knew how to. Obviously, for a lot of different reasons, it created a lot of tension, or things created a lot of tension between the two of us. But knowing that story and that backstory, and then coming through, and he ended up as a very, very high-level executive at General Electric, and retired in a very senior position, and had just worked his tail off to make sure that we would have. And when there were times when I needed things, that he gave me money and he gave me support, it was always there. So at the end of his life, and even so, when I knew that was happening, I had the resentments from earlier and things that might have happened. But when I think of all of the extraordinary life that he had, and the things that he accomplished, and the things that he was doing for me in a way that I didn't understand, at least that final moment that I was able to say, I want this relationship to end, his relationship with me on this earth to end with love. And it is when I decided to do that last day, when I sat down at the computer to write up that letter that I read to him, and when I saw the gift that was given to me for forgiving and for love, when I talked about the optimistic heart and the greatest things that emerge from our heart emerge with love, that is an example for me. It is an example of something that might be possible for you if you're holding on to a deep pain, finding a way to forgive yourself, to forgive another, to let it go. So it's a lesson that I learned, I will always remember. So when I'm holding on to something, and I think of, who's paying for this? Where is this pain coming from? And I realized the pain and who was causing it was coming from inside, and it was always up to me to let it go. You might have that opportunity. I would suggest at any time that you give some thoughts on taking it. So I hope you enjoyed this story. It was rather extraordinary, and I love sharing it. And it is something that comes from very, very deep in my heart. I've had a lot of life-changing moments, but that is definitely one of the very, very top, because it changed, it made me realize the power of forgiveness, and the power of love, and the power of a love for a father and a son. If you did like this story and did like this video, I ask you if you would go ahead and click the like button below. I would also ask that you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have a lot of different lessons and teachings that I'll be sharing, and other stories along the way. So it was wonderful having the opportunity to speak with you today. I hope you have an extraordinary day filled with love and compassion, and enjoy yourself very much. I love you, and thank you again for watching. Bye-bye now.